Hi, my name is Mr. Cordes, and today, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to go over and review a character chart. Character charts help us to understand the character more. It helps us to get to know who they are and why they do the things that they do. It also helps us understand their motives, the qualities, the attributes that kind of help craft that character throughout our story. So looking at the chart that you guys have in front of you, if this did not come up as you see here with the different boxes, you can create your own table that would kind of outline these same components. I always like to go outward because then you're kind of like almost literally pulling the character apart to see the different components. And so these are just some things that help us get started to think about the character a little bit more. If you don't have this and you want to insert a table, you can go up here to insert, go down to table. It looks like there's 4 on the outside plus the name. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a row here of 5. So I can go ahead and put in name. I can put in attributes. Okay. I can put in characteristics, textual evidence, how they respond to others. Okay. I can do all of that. If you are able to on the blank document that just like you see here, again, it is an image, it's a picture, so it might be a little bit difficult. If you would just like to do a chart like this, you can. Okay. I'm going to slide this over to offer me more room on the other side. So attributes, what's the other thing? Qualities. Okay. Characteristics. Okay, so I've got my character's name, I got attributes, I've got the question, how do they respond to others? Okay, it is different. My attributes and qualities are going to be different than when I'm responding to someone based upon the conversation or the situation or the experience. The other thing that we've got is a piece of textual evidence, something from the story that showcases what we've just written out. And then we've also got down here is a small picture that we can use to kind of there we go, to incorporate. I'm going to be marking up some stuff back here as well so we can kind of see how this works. So really pulling apart a character helps us to understand who he or she is. Just like I'm just not a teacher, there's other multiple facets of me, just like you are not only just a student. You're a student. You're also maybe a part of a team, a sports team. Maybe you're in a band. Maybe you like to work on cars, or maybe you like to go hiking. Like there's lots of different facets. You have lots of different relationships, and we need to understand who they are, who these characters are, as like holistically. Holistic means well-rounded. Okay. So as you go through, we're going to mark some things down. We have already read through chapters 1, chapters 2. We're kind of getting a sense of who these characters are. Today, we're going to take a look at Lenny. We'll unpack Lenny together. And then I'm going to have you do this same thing for George. Okay. So if you do have your chart and you're able to use it like this, you can. If you're able to use this, just simple graphic, you can. I'm going to put Lenny's name in the center. Okay, his name is Lenny Smalls. Lenny is a very interesting character. He comes across very childish. He comes across as like slow, like he's not all there, like all the lights are not turned on in the attic. But Lenny comes across as how do I describe this? Lenny comes across very codependent, or just basically dependent upon George. Okay. So there's a component that you see him almost as, like a child, like is attached to their mom or their dad, kind of for like safety reasons. So looking at that, you can't really look at Lenny without looking at George. Okay. And you can't look at George without looking at Lenny. So we're going to kind of pull apart, and that may give you some insight into how George is and when you put your character chart together for George. So let's go through some attributes and qualities for Lenny. I'm going to go back over to my text. This is the PDF of Mice and Men. This is what you got earlier. If this is not helpful for you, what you might be able to do is listen to the audio again. Let's see here. This is chapter 1. In chapter 1, we are introduced to the two main characters. George knelt beside the pool and drank. Tastes all right, he admitted. So this is George talking. George is telling Lenny not to drink from the still part of the water because it may not be good. They begin to talk about their farm. You'll notice the little man jerked down the brim of his hat. That's George. Okay, George, where are we going? Right? And it says, I forgot. Lenny said softly. I tried not to forget. Honest God, I did, George. Right? Okay. I'll tell you again. And I ain't going to tell you much, just what happens. Tired, said Lenny, but it ain't good. I remember about the rabbits, George. Now, if you remember through chapters 1 and 2, Lenny is really excited about raising these rabbits. He likes soft things. In the beginning of chapter 1, he had a dead mouse in his pocket just because he likes the soft nature of it. Part of his characteristic, I don't want to use the word simple, but part of his characteristics is that he is kind of childish, okay, or childlike in mind, meaning childlike in his thoughts and actions, okay? We're not going to say that he's we're not going to say that he's got like a mental deficiency. What we need to say is like he's got, I would say, a mental handicap. People during the early 1900s were not equipped with helping out people who had special ed needs. And so Lenny he has the mind of a child. Maybe that's the way that we can phrase it. He has the mind of a child. And so he comes across very innocent, right? There's the part in chapter 1 where he begins to say, well, I like beans with ketchup. And realizing that that's not an option. That's a very childlike response, a very innocent response of just telling his friend what he wants, okay? Let's put down that he's mentally slow, okay? He can't think and process like a normal middle-aged man would be able to do that. Do we remember how he's described? Okay. Do we remember how what his features are? Because he's not actually small. His name is Lenny Smalls, but he's not small at all. He's actually very large. Okay. I'm 6'3", and I would imagine that he's 2 or 3 or 4 inches taller than me, and just this big, strong, brute of a man. But he's large. He's tall. He's strong. There's another part that you begin to notice that he's actually carrying bags of grain all by himself versus where 2 men had to carry them, just one bag on its own. And so he's very strong. I'm also going to put down that he cares about others, okay? Especially George. They have a bond. They have a connection. They have a relationship together where they trust each other. Lenny is not able to be on his own, and so he's very dependent upon George. And George, out of the kindness of his heart, takes care of him once Lenny's family has passed away. So looking at this, their attributes: he's childish. He's got the mind of a child. He's mentally slow. He doesn't process things well. He's very tall. He's large. He's super strong. Okay. He does care about others. Now, looking at this, how he responds to others. Okay. We can mark down that, he is dependent on George. Okay. They got in an argument in chapter 1 that talked about, oh, you go live in a cave and I'm just going to go live in a cave and you can go off, and, they start arguing, but then realizing that they actually do need each other. So the way that he responds to others, he's dependent on George, wants to please George. Okay. And he also doesn't want to get in trouble, but he doesn't realize when he does get in trouble. Okay. It's like a small little child who may go into the cupboard or the pantry and pull out like a box of pancake mix and start throwing it everywhere. They don't know they're getting in trouble, but they want to, they don't want to upset their parents. So it's this idea of him wanting to please George. He doesn't want to get in trouble. Okay. Okay. He is very kind, but he is dependent on George. Okay, so that's how he responds to others. Is very like attached. Okay, like a child is attached. Now, if I'm drawing these over here, I'm going to pick one box for each. So up here, I'm going to put that he's tall, he's strong. I'm going to mark up also that he is childlike in his responses. Maybe if you want to put mentally slow. Okay. His actions kind of come across as childlike. His brain processing he's very slow to grasp the concepts of what's happening around him. Now, looking at this, we need to find some textual evidence. Okay. Looking back at our story, there's lots of good examples where he begins to talk. This is the part about the thing. He says, "What are you got taken out of that pocket?" "I ain't a thing in my pocket," Lenny said cleverly. And then they begin to talk about how he likes soft things. Actually, I'm going to put that as one of his attributes because that is pretty significant. Likes the touch of soft things. Okay, soft thing like fabric. He likes the fur. I think in my mind, after I've read this novel a couple times over, I think that's almost a coping mechanism for him. I think that it almost texturizes and makes him calm down and process and kind of helps him manage throughout the day. You actually see little tiny kids do this when they are trying to almost detox from the day, like they've been overstimulated, and they just kind of sit there and they like hold a blanket, right? Or they hold they suck their thumb, or if it's a pacifier, and that kind of helps soothe them. And I think the same thing is for Lenny. He likes the soft touch of things, and that kind of helps him process. That kind of helps him detox, decompress, and it's enjoyable for him. So, looking back at our text, let's find some textual evidence that would describe what he is like. It says, "We're going to the ranch. It's a quarter mile." Lenny says, "I know," and his face grew tight with thought, meaning even right here, we see that he is thinking and processing what is happening. Going over here, Lenny droned out, "I ain't got to say nothing." This is where they're getting used to what's going to happen when they do get to the ranch and talk to the boss. "There's enough beans for 4 men. He says, "I like them with ketchup." Okay, maybe that's the part that you want to put down for your piece of textual evidence. "I like beans with ketchup." Maybe that's the part that you put down. I'm not going to type anything. I want you to find a piece of textual evidence for Lenny. Okay, have you guys type that in? Let me go back to this. Then what we're going to see here is it says, "Well, the hell if I don't." She yells at me, and it talks about his Aunt Clara, who used to be with him and take care of him, but she wasn't. She isn't anymore. "Trouble with mice." George said, "Oh, we got to take them." There's the other part. I'm going to see. "We'll have a big vegetable patch and a rabbit hutch. I'll take care of the rabbits." Let's see. Go on, George. "How I get to tend the rabbits." Okay, I get to tend the rabbits. That's one thing that he says as well. Okay. This also part in chapter. Oh, this is the end right here. Just 8 pages. This is also the place where, in the very beginning, that they talked about the relationship between the two. Lenny is dependent upon George because of what happened in the last town and how they got kicked out of that town. George says in this moment, "Hey, if you get in trouble, come back to this spot. Come back to right here, and you and I will find you in this spot." That's something that George says. So you could actually probably use that quote for George because that shows that he's caring. That shows that he's compassionate. Lenny, "I like to tend the rabbits. I got beans with ketchup. I'm going to go live off in a cave." He was being like a child, that "I'm going to go run away and you're not going to have to deal with me anymore," trying to give him guilt, which was pretty funny. go ahead and put down your textual evidence right there in that box. I'm going to mark up, I like beans with ketchup. That right there, it kind of shows me that he's childlike. He's not thinking about the big situation. I mean, these men have they're on the road, they're traveling. And so a luxury like ketchup is not going to be available, but he just doesn't understand that. Now the picture, you could either draw a picture of Lenny. A lot of times I have students just draw like this really huge, massive guy. He's got on overalls, right? He's got a big straw hat on. He kind of has like a blank, pale look on his face. He's kind of just staring off. Sometimes people actually draw symbols. So I've had a lot of people in the past draw out a little tiny rabbit because that indicates that he likes soft things. So it's also almost like a representation. Okay. So with that being said, because we've done this, we understand Lenny a little bit more. We understand his complexities. So when we go into chapters 2 and 3 and 4, and he responds a certain way, we're like, oh, well, yeah, of course. He's got the mind of a child. He doesn't understand that's a joke. Of course, he doesn't want to fight this other farm worker because he doesn't want to get into trouble. You begin to process more about what happens to him when we begin to pull things apart. Okay. So part of the second task to this is to make a character chart for George. So you've done one for Lenny now, and you found a piece of textual evidence. Take a moment, either create that grid again, or if you want to draw it out like this, you can do that as well. And from here, what you'll be able to do is to do a box, do the boxes for George. Okay. What is going on for him? If you see here in chapter 2, chapter 1, he's very much a caretaker. If you go into reading chapter 2, you'll notice how he talks for George. He notices that he cares for him. There's the part where he's talking with Candy, and then Curly comes in, and then Curly's wife comes in, and whole mess. But the whole time George is kind of giving instruction, kind of almost parenting Lenny in that case. All right. So take a moment, go ahead and do a character chart for George. We're going to be doing these activities later. Very simple, very basic, but it helps us tremendously understand who our characters are.